Hello, everyone. This is James Nussbaumer, and while I'm just stepped outside here of the military center here at the Villages in Florida, and we had a nice meeting going on. Well, I'm on the remote here, getting all organized here, so you can see and hear me okay while I'm chatting here. But we just had I was one of the speakers, and we had just talked about uh, how people are brought together on the harshest of conditions, and you never know when you're going to meet someone that can change your life. And there was also a discussion going on about sentencing disparity in this country, where people are being sent to prison for unreasonably lengths of time for things that should be misdemeanors, or as were at one time before. For you excuse me, for you that don't know my story, I spent over 8 years in prison for a foolish securities violation as a financial advisor, and that my story was touched on there. But also, my story is contained in both of my books. I'm the author of these two books. The first one is called the Master of Everything. It's a story of mankind in the world of illusion we call life. And its sequel of an ever-developing series is called Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom. Both these books are on sale everywhere books are sold, and they are published by Ozark Mountain Publishing Company. And I hope that you will get a copy and become a valued reader of mine. So bear with me. I'm operating remotely here just outside of the nice military center that they have here at the Villages in Florida, which is about, I want to say 70 miles northeast of Orlando. Just a huge retiree area, 28 golf courses, just wonderful. But we had a great meeting there today before we're on our way to Barnes & Noble. But we were talking about how, and I brought up how sentencing disparity brought two men together, one of the two men including myself. And we thought our group here suggested I make a video of this, which a video has already been made of our meeting we just had a few minutes ago, about 15 minutes ago, and that will be on YouTube as well. So I thought I'd step outside the room here and do another private video to tell my personal story that's taken from my second book, Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom. But this book this video blog I've titled How Sentencing Disparity Brought Two Men Together. And bear with me while I check my technical process here on this remote device that I'm operating from. Okay, but prison sentencing disparity has been common in the United States with many judges, and often for political gain. A brand new evaluation of thousands of instances in mostly state common pleas courts has located huge variations in the jail sentences by courts supervising comparable situations. And there are questions concerning the level to which prison time is sentenced by the specific courts, as opposed to the conditions of the circumstances and situations. In my second book, this one here, Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom, which is Lessons from A Course in Miracles, I discuss at great lengths my many experiences of prison life. But one in particular is the stench and the grotesque smell of the county jail was inhumane, even the most conservative description. In the corner while I was there sat the 78-year-old white-haired man, gray-haired man, sobbing all through the night. My initial take on the unshaven, grizzly guy was that he was an alcoholic vagrant type doing a few days to dry out, because you do see quite a that in county jails. Maybe a drunken, disorderly violation, I'd figured, kind of like the bum on the street type scenario. Whatever his misdemeanor, he seemed very harmless, and I felt sorry for the man. The noise echoed off the cement walls and solid steel door of the cell, in a dank, cavity-infested area with germs and body odor that you just wouldn't believe, of this sorry group of inmates packed inside, ranging from DUI violations to violent criminals. One man was waiting for the transport bus to prison, where he would spend 3 years for car theft. Another was also waiting for prison and had just been sentenced to life in prison for rape. This type of temporary and unnecessary dumping and holding is the norm for prisoners in transit or waiting for backed up court hearings. At that time, I was there in transit from prison myself. I'd already been to prison, but I was sent back to the county court, to the local court, for technicalities on my own prison sentence. I expected my business to be finished by the end of that day and then be sent back to prison. But I had already been there for 3 weeks just waiting for my court date. During this time, I sat in this densely crowded jail cell with as many as 25 men at a time, when it was clear to see that the cell had been designed to sleep 6. And there was one toilet, one wash basin, one open shower, no windows, a few rows of tiered metal slab bunk beds. And when I say tiered, just bottom and top bunk, 30 inches apart from each other down the line. And some of the men were on their way to other counties, even to other countries, some to other states. When the metal bunk beds were fully occupied, which was almost always the case, the floor cots would be dragged in by newer inmates entering the cell and would be crammed into the 30 inches of space between each double bunk bed. With barely enough space to move around, the tipping over and stepping onto others was just a breeding ground for violent action. I met men who, after a few days in such holes, fell into severe shock. This is when I noticed a 78-year-old William, who later asked me to call him Willie. Something inside of me urged me to speak a few kind words to this despairing-looking and broken Irish-looking grandfather type of a guy with facial growth covered in dried blood. His gray beard was just covered in dried blood. He had explained to me when I asked what happened that guards had dragged him from the initial holding cell to his cell. Handcuffed and shackled during the move, Willie, at his age, couldn't keep up with the guards' brisk pace, and he had fallen down a flight of 3 or 4 steps, landing right on his face on the concrete floor. He had received no medical treatment at all, no medical attention. After a couple of days of watching Willie stare at the walls while leaning upright on his floor cot, I decided to approach him. He seemed relieved or comforted that during this horrendous time that I was offering a few minutes to chat to him. We hit it off fairly quickly, and as we sensed a mutual helping hand in one another. Through our conversations, though, and to my amazement, I discovered Willie to be very much a family man. His wife of 52 years had sadly passed away a few years prior, and with a lengthy stay in a nursing home due to a stroke. He had 2 loving sons who were close in age, and they were close to my age. At that time, I was age 51. Willie liked that about me. He'd said that I reminded him of his 2 sons. His sons had families of their own and were coping with the day-to-day struggles of balancing careers and family life. But their busy lives had blessed Willie with grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. He was thrilled. He was really a family man. The oldest of his sons had just left to go back to Oregon, but he had been at his father's side when Willie was sentenced to go to prison. Out of loneliness, Willie had remarried a woman about his age who loved to travel around the country with Willie in his motorhome. They had seen many great places traveling together in the 2 years that they had now been married. His new wife's daughter was against the marriage from the get-go, right from the start, however, and was causing a lot of chaos and grief in both their lives. She was concerned that Willie was going to squander her mother's nest egg and leave the estate penniless for herself as the rightful heir. Sounds typical, doesn't it? Willie told me that he hadn't remarried for the money at all. In fact, he was doing fine financially with his own pension from the post office and the estate that he and his first wife had worked hard to build. The new stepdaughter, about age 45, accused Willie of puncturing the tires on her brand new Lexus with an ice pick that was found at the scene. Willie had been spotted at the crime scene by neighbors, which he openly admitted. What had happened, he had gone to check out the area after he saw a gang of teenagers hanging around the new car. One thing led to another, and the stepdaughter was able to convince police that Willie was the culprit. Willie was charged with possession of a criminal tool, which was the ice pick. That's a felony, along with burglary, another felony. The very morning I met him with his face covered with dried blood, he had just been sentenced to 30 months, which is 2.5 years in prison. When the incident first occurred, Willie resulting in Willie's felony charges. He didn't want to trouble his two sons or interrupt their family lives. They were both living out west, and he did not want to put his own adversities onto them, making them become their problems. But Willie was in no way aware of the severity of the charges. He had no experience in this. He figured the whole mess could be straightened out by the public defender's office and maybe a fine or something like that if he was found guilty, and saw no reason to get an expensive lawyer involved. He didn't believe the state would want to send an old man to prison. But Willie was wrong. Willie was dead wrong. The state does want to send people to prison. In fact, the state is in the business of sending people to prison. This prison business involves big, big money. It keeps the law practices busy and the judicial system flowing. The public defender who was assigned to Willie had scared him into believing that if the jury found him guilty at a trial, he would receive at least 10 years in prison, partly to justify the expense of taxpayers' money to fund a trial. In this way, the system convinces people who are innocent of crimes to plead guilty and accept a plea bargain. At his age, Willie was not going to chance this. Willie had never been in trouble before. He felt there wasn't any need to discuss it with his sons, and he trusted the public defender's advice to take the deal. Without telling his sons, he accepted a 30-month, 2.5-year prison term with a possibility of being released early after 6 months. I spent a few days with Willie in the broiling summer heat of that oven of a cell before he was transported off to prison. I gained an unusual but bonding friendship with this all-American grandfather, and I learned much about myself in the process of sharing our views on life. My thoughts were to one day look him up when this tough time in both of our lives was behind us. A few days went by, and it was my turn to be shackled and handcuffed and transported back to Belmont Prison, some 2.5 hours away, where I still had a lengthy bit to go on my prison term most of the time, and I was a mess myself emotionally. About 90 days later, on a day when a busload of new prisoners were arriving from the state's main intake and perception center, a place to process new inmates into any one of the 32 men's prisons in Ohio, there was Willie checking into unit number 3 called 3 House. You see, when Willie left the county jail, he went to a reception area for about another 90 days and then was sent to where I was at. A coincidence, huh? Well, let's continue. There are 8 separate housing units at Belmont Prison. I was in one of the 8, which holds 272 prisoners, and they are always full, packed occupancy all the time. Belmont alone had 2 busloads a week coming into the prison, which gives you a good idea of the large number of new prisoners arriving and ones being released. It's just a continual revolving door. Sad to say, but true. What were the chances of Willie being assigned to Belmont, let alone to 3 House, where I was situated? It was once again a comforting meeting, and it was surely my pleasure to help Willie get squared away and to show him the ropes of his new prison environment, which can be very frightening. Believe me, prison is a rough place on everyone for countless numbers of reasons, and having a close friend by can make a world of a difference. Was it a coincidence that Willie showed up at Belmont, let alone into 3 House where I was at? I'll let you decide that for yourself. Willie has since served his 30-month sentence while I had stayed there, and was denied an early release as promised by the public defender. Was denied the early release. But I realized the public defender would have said that the court would consider early release. However, a prisoner in such harsh conditions will naturally take such a statement as an assurance, and Willie had certainly taken his attorney's advice to take the plea bargain used on the phrase 6 months. Willie had written to me often after he had left prison and had told me in detail what a feeling it was when his 2 sons both traveled from their homes out west to greet him as he walked out that prison gate after 2.5 years. He was 81 years old when he was released, over an ice pick and punctured tires. On one side, a teenage prank, we could say, for which he paid the consequences, and on the other hand, perception of a punctured estate. He doesn't have to worry about his wife any longer since their divorce was finalized just before he was sent to prison. But Willie has let go of all that. He has put it behind him. He has surrendered it, all that has occurred with her daughter and her and the wife. He had put all that behind. He says he understands that it takes two to tango, and he has planted in his mind a message that says, "Let the old battle axe be." That's how he said it to me. Willie now tells me that he has truly seen it all. Hey, everyone, to the best to you. And hey, I'm just a regular guy, and if you'd like to uh, leave me a message, if you're at this YouTube video down below, leave a comment, and also down below is a link that will take you to my own website. And feel free to leave me a message, and I promise that I will return all calls. And thanks again, and have a great day. Find your way here. Okay.